Nestled within Cannondale's road range, between the aero SystemSix and the lightweight SuperSix, sits the Synapse. With an emphasis as much on rider comfort as there is on speed and performance, the Synapse has remained the backbone of Cannondale's endurance range since 2002. While cycling has changed and technology has very obviously moved on since then, the original ethos and clever thinking behind the original Synapse has remained steadfast through various incarnations all the way up to this, the very latest, Synapse High Mod Disc Red eTap.
Now, obviously the Synapse range is quite extensive. Can you just give it a little bit of a breakdown?
Yeah, that's right. So there's actually 18 models within the Synapse range. This is one of those top three, so it's the high mods that makes the difference between them. So there are three, and this is the middle version of those three bikes.
So the high mod is the carbon fibre?
That's right. So they all use the ballistic carbon fibre. So this is Cannondale's proprietary sort of layup of carbon. But the high mod uses a lot more ultra and high modulus carbon fibres, which, as we know, are much lighter weight, and you can get away with using much less material and less resin, so therefore creating the same level of stiffness, but in a much lighter package.
Sure, and you mentioned that there's a lot of proprietary technology in Cannondale's range, and Cannondale have always been very good at creating things in-house. So what in particular is going on with the Synapse that they've done themselves? Yeah,
so they do. They love their little innovations and little anachronisms and things, and this is no different. So the main technology really behind the Synapse is the SAVE system. So this stands for Synapse Active Vibration Elimination. So it's all about creating a platform that helps to keep the rider as comfortable as possible, but not just that, to keep the bike rolling as quickly as possible as well.
Sure, and that's done by an intelligent carbon layup, I presume. It's slightly different, and it has key areas on the bike, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's it. So it's actually almost like a trifecta of different benefits. So there's three different ways that they actually do this, or they produce this save. So the first way is in that, as you said, the layup of the carbon. So they use layers of carbon in different formations. That is designed to actually effectively trap vibrations and almost like dissipate it before it can get to the rider. The second way is actually about the way that the fork and the rear stays work together. So effectively creating almost like micro suspension. So the fork is a very, very sort of like a sort of clever layup of carbon on there first and foremost, but then there's a bit of shaping, so it gives it a bit of like sort of added flex, and then offset dropouts as well, so you've got sort of as much flex as possible without sort of reducing the stiffness and the steering positivity. And then the rear end, you've got the very thin carbon chainstay, so this is like a classic design for like almost like creating sort of like a flex area, but Cannondale take it one step further with the seat stays have actually got like a helical shape. So rather than being just like sort of flattened to give you a bit of like movement in this way, they're actually twisted as well, so it's almost effectively creating a spring. So not only are they compliant in terms of like moving up and down, but can also compress. So effectively you've got a bit of movement there, so you've got both ends almost being a little bit suspended without having any moving parts.
Sure, and I mean those are some super skinny seat stays as well, aren't they? So that's probably going to have a built-in flex anyway in there.
But what you notice is they're incredibly thin from this direction, but from the side they're actually a lot sort of wider, so you still have that stiffness, so you don't find that they're sort of like flopping about all over the place. Then the final part of this SAVE trifecta, as I said, is the seat post. So what we have here is a super skinny 25.4mm seat post. This allows it, as you can imagine, to be very, very compliant. So there's a lot of movement in that carbon, and again, helps to eliminate the vibrations. They've also got away with the external seat clamp. So they've kept everything internal and underneath, which again gives you way more seat post. So therefore you've got as much compliance as you possibly can get.
That is true, because I've spent quite a lot of time on this bike and various Synapses in different videos and also just long-term testing. And one of the things that's always really impressed me is this fine balance that the bike has between endurance and performance. And it does really feel very fast when you're riding it, but comfortable at the same time.
Yeah, that was the first thing. I was the same. As soon as I sort of sat on that Synapse, and started pedaling, you think first of all you're on an endurance bike, so it's going to be sort of
has certain preconceptions about an endurance bike, doesn't it?
Yeah, a little bit vague, but actually it's incredible. It's like, sometimes you use those terms like magic carpet ride, but this is one of those bikes that I rode and went, my word, this is very, very, very comfortable, but it doesn't feel like my effort is being wasted.
Which is key, really.
Absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. As I say, you still have that sort of nice, engaging sort of power transfer. So as soon as you start pedaling, you feel like you're going somewhere.
In terms of its geometry, how does it compare to something like the SuperSix? Because that is Cannondale's benchmark bike. It's their performance racing bike, and it's one of the finest handlers on the market, really. So how much of that comes across to the Synapse, or does the Synapse suffer from that kind of endurance bike? It gets the handling goes a bit soft and it's just a bit less snappy.
Yeah, so there are like sort of, there's a lot of similarities between the two, but when you do look at the geometry charts and look at the measurements, there are obvious differences there. The two probably most obvious things that have an impact on the way the bike rides is obviously to do with the classic endurance bike, make the head tube as tall as possible. And they've extended the chainstays a little bit as well. So if we take those sort of as individual things, obviously that taller head tube means that it is a more comfortable, slightly more upright position, which, don't get me wrong, is incredible. Like if you do a long distance ride, that's great because you have that nice commanding sort of position. But I did notice that when you do ride the bike, it does actually have a slight impact on the handling, especially descending. Because you are that much taller, trying to get your weight on the front wheel is more difficult than on something like a SuperSix, which we'd expect anyway. And in a way, it's good to have that sort of slightly sort of more relaxed sort of handling. But I did feel there was times when I've tried to sort of drop this as much as possible because you've got that extra height in the head tube. The spacer stack is quite sort of high anyway, but what they've got is they've got this conical spacer with a normal spacer attached. So it means you can't drop it as much as you want. So you don't have that option. So I think that's one thing that I think Cannondale really maybe need to look at, is to sort of split this a little bit more. So it gives riders the option to actually put that.
Because that is quite high. The conical bit of that, top cap is high anyway, without having the spacer attached to it.
This is it. Between on this 56 centimetre, it means the lowest you can get the stem is effectively that's 20 centimetres with that sort of like that head tube and that spacer as well. And obviously, people will say, well, hang on a minute, it's an endurance bike, so you don't want it to be as racy as possible. But actually, because you've got that height anyway, dropping that stem isn't actually that going to cause that many difficulties. But it will have an impact on the handling, I think, for the better, if you can do that. The one thing I did sort of say, which is different, is the chainstays, and they are about 5 mil longer. Now, doesn't sound like much, 5 mil doesn't sound like a lot, but it does mean that it's a super stable descending bike. I love dropping down on this, even though obviously, as I said, you've got that thing. If you can get the balance right, it just means at the end of a long day in the saddle, you've got that stability, so you don't get that horrible sort of twitch that sometimes happens when you go into a corner and all of a sudden it tightens up, you're like, oh, hang on a second. So you've got that, and that's great. I do like the fact that they've done that to this bike.
So how much does this model cost, and what are you getting for that money?
So this particular model is, as I said at the start, sort of really sort of high up the range. So it's like effectively second from top. So it's £6,499.99. But for this, you get that high modulus frame, so you get that sort of top quality frame, and you've got a full SRAM red eTap group set. So that's the wireless group set. And
which
actually
was once the top of the range group set, but it has now been superseded by AXS.
Yes.
Do any of these bikes come with an AXS?
No. So the 2019 bikes, SRAM's the new AXS was released after the release of these bikes. So we'll expect to see probably next year's version, this is the 2020 version, coming with that. But this particular one has got the 11-speed version,
which is still a very good group set. I mean,
it is.
It's a performance group set. It's brilliant. If you have to take a little bit of time to get used to the shifting, but it's very good.
Yeah, it is very good. I think it's not the best. I think the new one has really sort of dealt with those sort of like few issues. I do find that the gear change can be a bit clunky sometimes on that, especially at the back. And if you compare that to the Di2, I find the Di2 personally a little bit
The Di2 is
smoother.
faster.
What you do get as well is you've got sort of Cannondale's hologram carbon wheel set. So this is one of their own brand things. So this is another thing that Cannondale does really well, is their own stuff is really top notch. And as you said, like when you had the SystemSix, those not 64 wheels.
The superb, absolutely superb wheels.
And the same said with these, the hologram HGs, these are obviously disc specific, but they're a 35mm carbon clincher. And what's really good about them is they're not super wide, so you still get a good level of compliance in there, but it's still a 90mm internal width, so it works incredibly well with these tyres. So it's a 28mm tyre on there, but I think this bike would do really well even with a 25mm. There's a great air volume in there, and it does add something to the comfort, but there's times when you sort of go, it could almost it almost deserves to have almost like a fast, dare I say it, a faster tyre?
Well, yeah, and I mean, these Vittoria Corsa tyres are excellent. They are super fast. They roll incredibly well and they're very supple. But on a wide internal width of rim anyway, chances are that these 28mm tyres are actually probably measuring up wider than that.
Yeah.
So if you were to spec a pair of 25mm tyres, you're probably going to be looking at getting 26, 27mm anyway.
Exactly.
So it's not like... A lot of people always think that an endurance bike has to come with a 28mm tyre, and they do add comfort, but if you do want to add that bit of speed, you can add a slightly narrower tyre, but expect it to still expand a little bit on the rim anyway.
This is it. So, and that's again sort of like testament to the style of bike the Synapse is. It is an endurance bike, rider comfort is emphasised, but it is still a very engaging, super fast bike to ride. And you could, in the right circumstances, happily get your gold standards and sportives easily. But also, you could turn up to a crit race or a road race on something like that, and people wouldn't look at you oddly either.
Now, obviously, you've been riding this. So, is there any other standout parts of the spec that you feel deserve to be shouted about?
I think. Yeah, because obviously Cannondale do a lot of their own parts, and sometimes you can get own brand parts. You sort of go, they've just chucked them on there to really to fill in the gaps. But actually, their handlebar is actually a really good bar. That's probably one of the other sort of standout parts on there.
It's carbon fibre.
Carbon fibre, which is at this sort of price you'd expect to see sort of carbon fibre, and it's a spot on sort of shape, and actually it's like a real decent level of of comfort and vibration dampening through that. And I really liked being in that sort of handlebar position. So that's really good. And probably the other standout part isn't the Cannondale part, but the fabric scoop saddle. I just love this saddle. It's so comfortable, and and it looks decent. It looks like a nice racy saddle, but as soon as you sit on it, you're like, oh, this is good. This is good. So I was very, very pleased to see that Cannondale continue that sort of relationship with this UK company, and sort of specking there on this particular model. It's the top flight carbon fibre rail one, but it's a super, super saddle.
Now, do you have a weight for this bike? Because that's quite key with endurance bikes, because they're traditionally seen as being a bit heavier than normal bikes, but that's not always the case anymore, especially with these performance orientated models. Yeah,
so this obviously, as I said, the 56 centimetre that I'm riding, without pedals but in standard spec, 6.92 kilos. Weighed that just before this.
That's super competitive.
It's really good.
That is really impressive.
Yeah, but then that is for the £6,500 high mod version, so it's got the lightest frame and obviously SRAM eTap, which is a light group set, and carbon wheels.
You can expect that weight to go up, obviously, the further down the range you go.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, it's impressive.
Yeah,
super light bike.
Yeah, you don't find that you're having any added sort of weight or drag when you're actually on the climb. So it's actually pretty, it's a very, very nice, engaging bike to ride. So that was my review of the Synapse High Mod Disc Red eTap version at £6,499. And well, if there's any other bikes you'd like to see us review, then please put it in the comment section below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to keep up with our latest releases. But until then, we'll see you again.